You're working Christmas again, Angela, and if you choose your family over this company, don't bother coming back. Richard Caldwell dropped the holiday schedule onto her desk, as if he were delivering a final judgment. Angela Brooks looked down at her name highlighted in yellow, then raised her eyes to the silver-haired executive standing over her. For the 7th year in a row, every other department manager had Christmas Day off. And for the 7th year in a row, Richard had chosen her. But what he didn't know was that this Christmas, Angela wouldn't be sitting at her desk. She would be sitting in his chair. 3 weeks earlier, snow had begun falling over Chicago, softening the sharp edges of the downtown buildings and covering the sidewalks in white. Inside the glass headquarters of North Star Medical Logistics, employees decorated their cubicles with silver garlands, miniature trees, and strings of colored lights. Angela barely noticed. At 42, she had spent 15 years helping North Star deliver medical equipment to hospitals across the Midwest. She was a tall black woman with deep brown skin, observant dark eyes, and natural curls that fell just above her shoulders. That morning, she wore a burgundy sweater beneath a tailored black blazer, small gold earrings, and the tired expression of someone who had learned to carry disappointment without letting it slow her down. Her office walls held no awards, although she had earned several. Instead, they displayed photographs of her family. In the largest picture, Angela stood beside her 71-year-old mother, Lorraine, and her 15-year-old daughter, Nia. All three wore matching green Christmas pajamas and ridiculous reindeer antlers. The photograph had been taken 6 years earlier. It was the last Christmas morning Angela had spent at home. Richard Caldwell, 58, was North Star's senior vice president of operations. He was broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed, and known for checking his reflection in the conference room windows before difficult meetings. His gray hair was always neatly combed, his suits were custom-made, and his smile appeared only when someone more powerful entered the room. Richard called his management style demanding excellence. Most employees called it survival. Whenever a shipment arrived late, Richard blamed Angela's team. Whenever emergency orders were delivered ahead of schedule, Richard accepted congratulations from the board. Angela had rewritten North Star's outdated distribution procedures, trained half the regional managers, and quietly prevented at least 3 hospital contracts from collapsing. Yet Richard had denied her promotion 4 times. "You're too valuable where you are," he always said. It sounded like praise, until Angela understood what it meant. He wanted her labor, not her advancement. That afternoon, Richard leaned against her doorway and tapped the Christmas schedule with one manicured finger. "Everyone makes sacrifices," he said. Angela glanced at the names around hers. Michael would be home with his sons. Rebecca was flying to Colorado. Richard himself had reserved a luxury lodge in Wisconsin for his wife, children, and grandchildren. Then why is the sacrifice always mine? His expression tightened. "You're the continuity director. Holiday coverage is part of leadership. So is sharing the burden. You volunteered the first year." Angela remembered it clearly. A winter storm had disrupted medical deliveries across Illinois. She had offered to stay because Richard's youngest daughter was hospitalized with pneumonia. Lorraine had saved Angela a plate of Christmas dinner, and 5-year-old Nia had waited by the window until she fell asleep. Richard had thanked Angela then. The following year, he scheduled her again without asking. By the 3rd year, her volunteering had somehow become a permanent obligation. Richard straightened his blue silk tie. "I don't have time for an argument. My mother's health is getting worse. Nia is singing a solo at church on Christmas morning. I've already missed 6. That's unfortunate, but personal matters cannot interfere with operational needs." Angela stared at him. "Your daughter being sick was a personal matter too." For one brief second, shame flickered across Richard's face. Then it disappeared. "Be careful, Angela." He walked away, leaving the schedule on her desk. That night, Angela returned to the small brick house in Oak Park, where she lived with Nia and Lorraine. Warm light filled the kitchen, and cinnamon drifted from a tray of cookies cooling beside the stove. Lorraine sat at the table wearing a cream cardigan, her oxygen tube resting beneath her nose. Though illness had made her frame smaller, her eyes remained bright and direct. Nia stood at the counter decorating cookies. She had Angela's dark eyes, long braids tipped with gold cuffs, and a quiet maturity that made Angela proud and uneasy at the same time. "Did you ask him?" Nia said. Angela removed her coat slowly. "I asked." "And?" The silence answered for her. Nia placed the icing bag on the counter. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Angela saw it in the way her daughter looked down. She saw 7 Christmases stacked behind that expression, 7 empty seats at church, 7 delayed dinners, 7 promises that next year would be different. Lorraine reached across the table and covered Angela's hand. "Baby, providing for your family should never require disappearing from it." Angela's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. "I can't risk losing the insurance. Your treatments." "I know what you carry," Lorraine said softly. "But dignity is not something a job gives you. It's something you stop handing away." From the kitchen window, Angela could see snow gathering on the dark branches outside. For the first time, she wondered whether loyalty had become another word for fear. If you've ever watched a hardworking person be punished because they were dependable, subscribe and stay with Angela, because Richard's Christmas schedule was only the beginning. The following Monday, Angela received a confidential email from North Star's internal audit department. The message requested records related to holiday staffing, emergency delivery costs, and contractor payments from the past 5 years. Angela's first thought was that the board had finally noticed how unfairly the holiday shifts were assigned. She was wrong. While reviewing invoices, she found that North Star had paid unusually high holiday emergency fees every December. According to Richard's reports, those payments covered temporary drivers, warehouse crews, and specialized delivery contractors. But Angela knew many of those workers had never been hired. Her own team had completed the work. She compared shipment logs, payroll records, and vendor invoices. One contractor appeared repeatedly: Caldwell Strategic Services. Angela stared at the name. A corporate search showed the company belonged to Thomas Caldwell, Richard's younger brother. More than $860,000 had been paid to the business over 5 years. Several invoices carried Angela's electronic approval. She had never seen them. The discovery turned her hands cold. She called Daniel Kim, North Star's internal audit director. Daniel was 46, lean and serious, with rectangular glasses and a habit of speaking quietly when the situation was most dangerous. He came to her office after most employees had left. Angela closed the door and showed him the invoices. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Did you authorize these?" "No." "Who had access to your approval credentials?" Richard's office requested delegated authority during the first Christmas storm. He said it was temporary. Daniel studied the dates. Every questionable invoice was processed while you were working holiday operations. Angela finally understood why Richard always needed her in the building. Her presence made the paperwork believable. "You think he used me as cover? I think we need evidence before he realizes we're looking." Over the next 10 days, Angela and Daniel quietly reconstructed the scheme. Richard had exaggerated holiday emergencies, approved payments to his brother's company, and manipulated access logs to make it appear that Angela had authorized them. But the final evidence was hidden inside North Star's archived phone system. A recorded call captured Richard instructing a finance supervisor to process one of the invoices. "Use Brooks's authorization," his voice said. "She's on duty, so no one will question it." The finance supervisor hesitated. What if Angela sees it? She never does. She's too busy cleaning up everyone else's problems. Angela listened without moving. The fraud hurt, but his certainty hurt more. Richard had not merely exploited her workload, he had mistaken her integrity for blindness. Before Daniel could deliver the findings to the board, Richard discovered that archived records had been accessed. He summoned Angela to his office. The room overlooked the Chicago River, with dark wood shelves, leather chairs, and family Christmas cards arranged across his desk. Richard stood beside the window, gripping a printed access report. "You've been reviewing confidential vendor files. Internal audit requested operational records. You should have referred them to me. They were investigating your department." His face hardened. You're confused about your position. No, Richard. For the first time, I understand it completely. He stepped closer. Those invoices carry your approval. If questions are raised, your name is the one attached to them. It was not a denial. It was a threat. Angela felt fear rise inside her, but she kept her voice steady. Are you saying I approved fraudulent payments? I'm saying records don't care about anyone's personal story. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then Richard picked up a document from his desk. A termination recommendation. He had already prepared it. Accept responsibility for procedural failures, he said, and I may convince the board to let you resign quietly. Angela looked at the signature line. 15 years of work, thousands of deliveries. Missed birthdays, school events, and Christmas mornings. Reduced to a blank space beneath a lie. She pushed the document back toward him. No. Richard's nostrils flared. Think about your mother's medical bills. The words landed with surgical precision. Angela's voice dropped. You don't get to use my family after stealing my time from them. She left his office without signing. The next morning, Richard suspended her pending investigation. Her building access was disabled, her company laptop was confiscated, and a security guard escorted her through the lobby as employees watched in stunned silence. Angela held her head high until she reached the parking garage. Then she sat in her car and cried. Daniel stopped answering her calls. Internal audit's case appeared to have vanished. Richard told senior management that Angela had exceeded her authority and manipulated vendor records. By Friday, rumors had spread that she was responsible for the missing money. It seemed Richard had won. At home, Angela tried to hide the truth, but Lorraine noticed the cardboard box containing her office belongings. Nia found the Christmas photograph inside it. They fired you? Suspended? Because you asked for Christmas off? Angela sat beside her daughter on the couch. Because I found something a powerful man didn't want found. Can he blame you for it? He's trying. Nia took her hand. Then tell the truth louder. Angela gave a sad smile. Sometimes the truth doesn't win quickly. Lorraine, standing in the doorway with one hand on her oxygen machine, answered for her. Quickly and never are not the same thing. On December 23, Daniel finally called from an unfamiliar number. I'm sorry I disappeared, he said. Richard was monitoring internal communications. I took the evidence directly to the audit committee. Angela stood abruptly. What happened? The board meets tomorrow. They want you there. On Christmas Eve, Angela entered North Star through a side entrance and rode a private elevator to the executive floor. Inside the boardroom, 12 directors sat around a polished table. At the far end was Evelyn Shaw, North Star's 63-year-old CEO, a white woman with cropped silver hair, calm blue eyes, and a reputation for remembering every number placed in front of her. Richard sat near the window with two attorneys. When Angela entered, he looked irritated rather than afraid. Evelyn motioned toward an empty chair. Ms. Brooks, we've reviewed the evidence. Before we proceed, is there anything you want this board to understand? Angela looked around the room. Yes, Richard's fraud should be investigated, but so should the culture that allowed it. Richard scoffed. This is not the time for a speech. Evelyn turned toward him. You no longer control the time in this room. Angela continued. For years, North Star rewarded managers who protected appearances and punished employees who protected the actual work. Richard could steal because everyone trusted his title more than they trusted the people beneath him. I reported staffing abuse twice. Both complaints were returned to his office. Evelyn's face changed. You filed formal complaints? Angela placed copies on the table. One carried an HR acknowledgement. Another had been marked resolved without an interview. The director of human resources turned pale. Daniel then played the archived recording. Richard's voice filled the boardroom. Use Brooks's authorization. She's on duty, so no one will question it. When the recording ended, Richard's lawyer whispered something to him. Richard rose. My brother provided consulting services. Any administrative mistakes were made by Angela's department. Daniel slid forward security logs showing that Richard's executive credentials had been used to apply Angela's digital approval. Then Evelyn revealed the final blow. Thomas Caldwell had agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. Richard's composure collapsed. He looked at Angela, his face flushed with anger and disbelief.
The offshore
After everything I did for you? Angela stood slowly. You didn't make me valuable, Richard. You only made sure I was too exhausted to notice that I already was. Richard was terminated that afternoon. His access was revoked, his bonus frozen, and the evidence was referred to federal authorities. The HR vice president who buried Angela's complaints resigned during the investigation. But the board still faced an immediate problem. North Star had lost its senior vice president of operations during the busiest week of the year. Evelyn asked Angela to remain after the others left. You know this company's distribution network better than anyone, she said. I want you to serve as interim senior vice president while we conduct an external search. Angela looked through the glass wall toward Richard's corner office. I've served in an interim capacity for 15 years. I just never received the title. Evelyn nodded slowly. What would it take for you to accept? A permanent appointment, independent oversight of vendor approvals, a protected employee reporting system, and holiday coverage that rotates from the executive level down. Evelyn extended her hand. Done. On Christmas morning, North Star's headquarters was nearly empty. Snow moved past the windows as Angela entered Richard's former office wearing a deep green dress, a black wool coat, and the gold earrings Lorraine had given her. The nameplate had already been removed. Angela sat behind the desk, not to celebrate Richard's fall, but to approve a new emergency staffing plan before leaving for church. At 8:12 a.m., the phone rang. It was Marissa Cole, the newly appointed acting HR director. Ms. Brooks, the board has finalized your appointment. Congratulations, Senior Vice President Brooks. Angela looked at the family photograph she had placed beside the computer. Thank you. There's one more issue, Marissa said. Someone has to authorize today's executive holiday rotation. Angela opened the schedule. Richard's name remained on it because his termination had occurred too late for the system to update. She stared at it for a moment, then deleted the entire assignment. Close the administrative office, Angela said. The emergency team has enough coverage, and they're receiving double pay. Everyone else should be with their families. At New Hope Baptist Church, Nia stood beneath warm golden lights in a white dress and sang her Christmas solo. This time, when she searched the congregation, her mother was there. Angela sat beside Lorraine in the front row, tears moving freely down her face. Lorraine squeezed her hand. You made it. Angela smiled through her tears. I finally stopped asking permission. In the months that followed, Angela transformed North Star's workplace culture. Holiday shifts became voluntary and fairly compensated. Executives joined the rotation. Promotions required documented performance reviews, and confidential complaints went to an outside ethics firm. Angela also created a leadership development program for employees who had been called too valuable to promote. Richard later pleaded guilty to financial crimes connected to the false contracts. Angela never celebrated his sentence. She understood that justice did not return the Christmas mornings she had missed, but it protected someone else from losing theirs. The following December, Angela left work at noon on Christmas Eve. As she walked through the lobby, employees waved goodbye instead of lowering their eyes. On her desk sat a framed note from Nia. It read, "Strength is not how much unfairness you can survive. Sometimes strength is deciding you deserve better." Angela switched off the office lights and closed the door. If Angela's story moved you, share it with someone who has ever been taken for granted. And tell us in the comments, would you have confronted Richard sooner or waited until you had enough evidence to bring him down? Because loyalty should never be measured by how much of your life you are willing to lose, and the people who depend on your silence should never be surprised when you finally find your voice.